That morning, Preston Vale, the newly appointed CEO, was the founder's son, took over the office like a spoiled heir. Without asking permission, he interrupted others mid-sentence, dismissed updates with a wave of his hand, and smirked when senior managers tried to explain. The title said it all. No one objected. When he called me in, the decision was already rehearsed. He leaned back and said, "We're cutting anything that slows execution." Then he looked at me like I was already gone. Do you know? While writing this story, I had to wrap myself in a down comforter because it was so cold. How about where you are? What's the temperature like right now? And if you're still here listening with me, please leave your lucky number so I know. I had spent 14 years as head of compliance and strategic accounts, keeping this company out of lawsuits, audits, and regulatory disasters. I built systems so growth wouldn't implode under scrutiny. Preston didn't mention a single one of those outcomes. This company needs velocity, he said flatly, not people stuck protecting the past. I waited for the justification out of habit metrics, warnings, even a fabricated misstep. Nothing came. He checked his phone instead. You're terminated, effective immediately, in that moment. I understood my real offense. Compliance made him feel constrained. Process made him feel questioned. I represented limits, and limits don't survive around men who confuse speed with intelligence. I stood, nodded once, and thanked him. Not because I agreed, but because arguing would have implied fairness. There was none. I walked past teams I had trained and crises I had quietly neutralized, carrying my silence with me. When I left, Preston began signing briskly, page after page, without reading a single line. He looked satisfied. The pen moved fast, and for him, that was all that mattered. What happened next unfolded faster than anyone expected, and before you continue, a brief note for clarity. The following story includes fictionalized elements and uses technology-assisted storytelling for educational and emotional impact. I hope you find something meaningful in it, and if not, please take care, rest well, and look after yourself. I didn't go home angry. I went home hollow. The kind of emptiness that comes when something essential has been erased without discussion. As I packed away old notebooks, memories surfaced uninvited. Over 14 years. I had shut down 3 federal investigations before they reached subpoenas. I had rewritten reporting structures overnight, corrected disclosure errors before regulators noticed, and built a compliance framework that protected contracts ranging from $120 million to $300 million. No press releases, no applause, just quiet containment. That was the work Preston called fear-based leadership. I heard him say it later, laughing with an executive team still eager to impress. Fear, to him, was caution. Process was weakness. He believed confidence alone bent reality. Listening to that, something inside me tightened, not rage, not yet, but clarity. Compliance never slowed growth. It kept growth from exploding. Every safeguard I designed allowed speed without collapse, ambition without indictment. Preston never saw that architecture because it didn't flatter him. He mistook invisibility for irrelevance. As the hours passed, the insult shifted shape. This wasn't about my performance. It was about his ignorance wearing certainty like armor. His confidence wasn't earned. It was inherited, reinforced by silence and unchecked authority. Then a detail surfaced, sharp and undeniable. One of the contracts he had signed that morning, the flagship agreement everyone was celebrating, required a living authorization. My signature, not a scan, not a proxy, without it. The deal existed only on paper, and Preston had no idea yet. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone untouched. When my phone finally rang, I didn't recognize the number, but I recognized the pause before I answered. Whatever came next would matter. When I picked up, the voice on the other end was already tight. "Luna, this is Calvin Vale," he said. "Founder, chairman, the man whose name was etched into the company's identity." He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Did Preston review the authorization appendix? I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was surprised, but because the question confirmed what I already knew. Calvin's voice sharpened. Luna! No, I said calmly. He didn't. There was a sharp inhale, followed by the sound of papers moving too quickly. Calvin spoke again. Lower now, controlled but strained. The $180 million deal he signed this morning without your authorization. It's invalid. Legally void. Yes, I replied. That clause was added after the Ridgeway incident. You approved it, I remember. He said. What I didn't realize is that Preston signed as sole representative. His voice tightened. He doesn't have that authority. Not without you. I leaned back, listening, letting him finish. Calvin continued. Words coming faster now. Our counsel just confirmed it. Preston's signature doesn't bind us. The counterparty has already flagged the discrepancy. If this collapses, the board will ask why. I said nothing. Silence can be informative when used correctly. Luna, Calvin said again, this time carefully. Preston acted without understanding the structure you put in place. He doesn't have standing on strategic agreements of this scale. That was intentional, wasn't it? It was protective. I answered, for the company. Another pause. Then the question arrived. Quieter but heavier than the rest. Can you come back today? We need you to finalize this before it becomes public. I looked out the window, watching traffic move without urgency. The request hung between us, raw and unresolved, for the first time since the morning. I felt completely clear. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply let the silence speak, and waited. I didn't feel rushed anymore. Once the phone call with Calvin ended, the pressure shifted away from me and landed exactly where it belonged. My phone started vibrating within minutes. Unknown numbers, missed calls, voicemails stacking without being opened. Preston was first, then HR, then legal. His messages followed a pattern urgency without accountability. There's been a miscommunication. We need to realign. Please call me immediately. Not once did the word sorry appear. Panic dressed itself as professionalism. And it was transparent. I didn't answer. Control doesn't require noise. It requires patience. While my phone lit up, the company unraveled quietly. Calendar alerts vanished. Meetings were postponed, then canceled. A negotiation call disappeared entirely. People who had ignored my warnings for years were suddenly unsure who could approve what. A former colleague texted from inside the building. Everything's frozen. Preston's asking questions no one can answer. Another message followed minutes later. Legal just walked out of a meeting. HR looks terrified. I imagined him pacing, trying to project certainty while realizing the systems he dismissed were the only things holding the structure together. By early afternoon, Preston tried a different angle. We need to fix this before it escalates. He left in a voicemail, voice tight. IT is reviewing access. We're securing systems. That word securing was almost impressive in its irony, because that was the moment he crossed the line without realizing it. In his rush to regain control, Preston ordered IT to disable my remaining credentials. He thought he was closing a door. Instead, he tripped a wire. The audit alert didn't announce itself loudly. It never does. A silent flag triggered when restricted access was altered during an active contract window. Automated, non-negotiable, the kind of safeguard designed for executives who act before understanding consequences. I felt it then, not joy. Not revenge, but something steadier, satisfaction, earned by preparation. Preston believed speed created authority. I knew better. Control comes from systems built to survive arrogance, and the system had just noticed him. That realization settled calmly, quietly, and permanently. While his panic continued spreading through hallways, he no longer controlled inside. If you notice a hasty command to secure access that has silently caused all of this, please comment 1. The audit didn't arrive with drama. It arrived quietly, the way serious things always do. An automated notice, a neutral subject line, a request for documentation, no accusations, no raised voices, just procedure moving forward without asking permission. I was contacted as a reference point, not a suspect. That distinction mattered. The auditors asked for timelines, authorization paths, and decision records tied to recent executive actions. I provided them without commentary. First came the signatures documents executed without required sign-offs. Authority assumed where it had never been granted. Then the clauses Preston had skipped entirely. Provisions designed to prevent exactly this kind of unilateral action. Each omission formed a pattern. The emails came next, not written directives, but messages hinting at intent. Let's not slow this down. Handle it verbally. No need to loop everyone in. Language meant to bypass accountability while maintaining plausible deniability. I recognized it immediately. I had spent years protecting the company from that habit. When asked if I had additional records, I submitted my personal log. 14 years of entries, dates, decisions, risk assessments, warnings delivered and acknowledged, not emotional, not vindictive, just factual continuity. I didn't frame it as defense. I framed it as history. The room stayed quiet as the auditors reviewed it. No one interrupted. No one needed to. The evidence didn't require persuasion. It spoke cleanly on its own. A few hours later, the tone shifted. Questions narrowed. Language became precise. At this level, one auditor said carefully, "These actions constitute more than operational oversight." I understood what he meant before he finished the sentence. They used the term fiduciary duty, breach, board-level exposure, authority exercised without comprehension of obligation. Preston's confidence had crossed into liability. When the confirmation came, I felt nothing spike. No satisfaction, no anger, just calm alignment. The system had done exactly what it was built to do: measure behavior against responsibility and respond without emotion. I thanked them for their time and ended the call. Outside, the day continued unchanged. Inside the company, something fundamental had shifted. Preston hadn't just made mistakes. He had violated trust at the highest level. And now, that reality belonged to the board, not to me. The board meeting was scheduled quickly, without ceremony, which told me everything I needed to know. Preston wasn't hiding anymore. He was preparing to fight. When I entered the room, the atmosphere was tight, rehearsed. Screens were on, notepads aligned. Preston sat upright, jaw set, already framed as the future under threat. He began before anyone invited him. "Luna has been resistant to innovation," he said, voice controlled but sharp. "Every time we try to move faster, she raises concerns. That mindset belongs to the old culture." He didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at the board. Selling certainty, I let him finish. Interrupting would have validated his narrative. He continued, leaning into it. "We can't scale if fear dictates leadership. This company needs bold execution, not endless caution." Heads shifted. No one spoke yet. When the chair nodded toward me, I stood calmly. "I don't resist progress." I said evenly, "I resist negligence dressed as confidence." The room stilled. I continued, measured. Innovation without structure isn't speed, it's exposure. Every safeguard Preston dismissed existed to protect the company from preventable damage. Preston scoffed. "That's exactly the problem. You assume worst-case scenarios instead of opportunity." His voice rose slightly. "We're not a museum." "No," I replied. "We're a corporation with legal obligations." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Compliance didn't slow growth. It allowed growth without collapse. The tension thickened as eyes moved between us. I could feel Preston pushing for a reaction, something emotional he could label resistance. I gave him none. Facts don't flinch. Then I noticed Calvin Vale, founder, chairman, father. He sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, expression unreadable. Throughout the exchange, he said nothing. No defense, no correction, no support. Preston glanced toward him more than once, expecting alignment. It never came. The silence grew heavier than any argument. That was the moment I understood the shift. Calvian's quiet wasn't indecision, it was observation, and in that room, silence carried more weight than authority, and everyone at the table felt the confrontation move beyond dispute. The room settled once it was my turn to speak, not because I demanded it, but because evidence has its own gravity. I didn't raise my voice or argue intent. I laid out a timeline, clean and chronological, starting with the morning Preston assumed authority and ending with the audit trigger he never anticipated. I walked them through each decision point, which contracts required living authorization, which clauses limited executive discretion, which approvals had been bypassed, dates, signatures, omissions, no adjectives, no commentary, just sequence. I watched shoulders straighten as understanding replaced speculation. Then I addressed exposure. If the counterparty challenges enforceability, I said, the liability isn't theoretical. I let the number sit between us. $430 million in potential litigation, penalties, and clawbacks. Pen stopped moving. Someone exhaled quietly. Preston shifted in his seat. That's exaggerated, he said quickly. We've always moved fast. His confidence sounded thinner now, stretched by facts he hadn't prepared for. Speed isn't the issue, I replied. Authority is. I pointed to the clause he'd ignored, the one approved years earlier by the board itself. This limits representation when fiduciary risk exceeds thresholds. Those thresholds were crossed. I didn't look at Preston. I didn't need to, one by one. The board members began asking questions, not about my tone, about the documents, about exposure, about insurance. The conversation had changed. Momentum shifted quietly, decisively. That was when the general counsel leaned forward. He hadn't spoken until then. He turned to Preston. Voice level, precise. Did you understand what you were signing? He asked. Or did you assume no one interrupted? Preston opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was conclusive. Evidence doesn't need emotion to dominate a room. It just needs to be complete. I remained seated, hands still, aware that control had shifted without a single raised voice. In that moment, preparation outweighed pedigree, and process outweighed bravado, leaving only accountability on the table for everyone to see, including board members who had mistaken silence for safety until now and were forced to recalibrate their assumptions. If you agree with handling a crisis by laying out the timeline, the violated clauses, and the real financial risk without emotion or excuses, press 2. Calvian Vale did not speak right away. He sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, as if weighing something heavier than contracts or titles. The room waited. So did Preston. The confidence he had carried in earlier now fractured, leaking impatience. This is being blown out of proportion, Preston said suddenly. Voice sharp. We can fix this. We don't need to make it a spectacle. His words came faster, louder. You're choosing paperwork over leadership. Calvin finally looked up. Not at me. At his son. There was no anger in his expression, only fatigue. You were given authority, he said quietly. Not immunity. Preston stood. I'm trying to move this company forward. She's clinging to outdated systems. He gestured toward me, frustration spilling over. This is what happens when fear runs strategy. I didn't respond. This wasn't my moment anymore. It never was. Calvin rose slowly, every movement deliberate. This company exists because people respected boundaries, he said, because they understood consequences. His voice tightened. Just slightly, you ignored both. The room felt smaller then. Preston opened his mouth again, but the words came out uncontrolled. So what? You're siding with her after everything. The question carried something raw, almost desperate. Calvin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the decision was already settled. I'm protecting what you don't yet understand, he said. The legacy. Silence followed, heavy and final. Calvin turned to the board. Effective immediately, he said. Steady but strained. Preston Vale is suspended from all executive authority pending review. Preston froze. You can't do that, he said, voice cracking. I'm your son. Calvin nodded once. That's why this hurts, he replied. But this room isn't about family. No one spoke. No one needed to. The truth sat between us. Undeniable. Preston's face hardened, then fell, the arrogance collapsing into something smaller. I remained still, feeling no triumph, only the weight of witnessing a father choose principle over blood. Justice, I realized, doesn't always feel clean. Sometimes it feels like grief, carried quietly by real leadership under pressure always. The announcement never came. No company-wide email, no carefully worded statement, no attempt to control the narrative. Preston Vale simply stopped appearing. His calendar was wiped, his access revoked. By the end of the week, his name vanished from internal threads as if it had never belonged there. People whispered instead, "He's gone." Someone said near the elevators. Another voice answered, "Terminated." No one corrected them. No one defended him. The silence was intentional. Public explanations invite scrutiny, and scrutiny was the last thing the board wanted. What followed was quieter, but more revealing. Calls resumed. Cautiously at first, one partner asked, "Will Luna be overseeing this account again?" Another was more direct. "We're comfortable proceeding only if she signs. No threats, no ultimatums, just conditions stated plainly." I returned for meetings, not as an employee reclaiming a desk, but as the authority the contracts recognized. Documents were routed to me automatically. Legal waited for my confirmation before moving. The same executives who had avoided eye contact days earlier now deferred without comment. Order restored itself once the right name was attached. An offer came shortly after. Same title, same responsibilities. A careful attempt to rewind time. I listened, thanked them, and declined. I won't step back into a role that can be erased by impulse, I said evenly. The line held. That decision settled everything. The partners stayed. The deals closed. The company stabilized. Preston's exit required no spectacle because accountability rarely does. It doesn't need headlines or punishment to feel complete. As I walked out that evening, I felt something rare in corporate life resolution. Not victory, not revenge, but alignment. The system corrected itself. The noise faded, and for the first time since that morning, the quiet felt earned. It reminded me that leverage isn't loud, and justice doesn't announce itself. When processes work, outcomes arrive without ceremony. Power shifts quietly. Those paying attention understand why. Those who aren't simply disappear from the story, leaving behind lessons no memo could ever teach. This ending felt final, measured, and complete. The kind earned only through restraint and patience. The transition happened without ceremony, which felt appropriate. I accepted the new role quietly, Chief Risk and Governance Officer. No applause, no announcement, just a revised structure and a clear mandate. My responsibility was simple: ensure that no executive decision could bypass accountability again. I started with systems, not people. Approval thresholds were redefined. Dual authorization became mandatory on strategic contracts. Audit triggers were automated, not discretionary. Authority was documented, limited, and visible. These weren't punishments. They were guardrails, designed to protect the company from impulse disguised as leadership. The office felt different within weeks. Conversations slowed enough to become deliberate. Decisions carried weight again. People stopped asking who had power and started asking what the process required. One afternoon, while reviewing the new strategic roadmap, I noticed something absent. Preston Vale's name wasn't there. Not as a stakeholder, not as a footnote. It had been removed from every internal document shaping the company's future. I closed the file and leaned back, feeling the calm that comes from alignment. Order had returned through structure. Nothing needed to be explained anymore to anyone involved there now. Some people inherit authority. Others design the rules that decide how long it lasts. Quietly, permanently. When everything was over, I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. The kind of calm that comes when your actions match your values, even under pressure. That, to me, is dignity not loud, not reactive, but steady. This experience reminded me that real strength isn't about defeating someone else. It's about refusing to become smaller when someone tries to erase you. I didn't move to punish. I moved to protect systems, people, and principles that outlast any single personality. As we go through life, especially after we've been tested a few times, we learn something important: authority can be given, but respect is sustained. Titles come and go. What remains is how we carry ourselves when no one is applauding. Here's the question I keep returning to. If your work, your integrity, and your name were dismissed in a single moment, would you respond with anger or with clarity? Would you chase revenge? Or would you choose a path that lets you sleep at night? I hope this story offered more than drama. I hope it offered a quiet reminder that you're allowed to protect your worth without raising your voice. If this resonated, subscribe for more stories, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this along with a like or share to someone who might need it today quietly.